Acestea fiind zise, aș vrea să mulțumesc panelului de deschidere și să ne îndreptăm către prima etapă importantă a conferinței noastre. O să schimb în engleză pentru că trebuie să o invit la cuvânt pe președinta EERA. So I will switch briefly in English now because the opening ceremony it's ended up at 12:30 sharp, and the first substantive academic activity that we have scheduled for today, it is the keynote speech of Marit Honerød Hoveid. She is Professor of Pedagogy at Norwegian University for Science and Technology in Norway, but she's also the current president of European Educational Research Association. Marit will deliver us a keynote speech in agreement with the topic of the ESER this year and with agreement with the CNPEE this year. We are every year mirroring the main topic of the EERA conference in our national conference. So, Marit, I invite you to tell us about thinking diversity in educational research, revisiting relations between educational research and practice in education.
Thank you.
So, please.
You want me up here? Yeah, probably.
I think it's easier.
Oh, great. Okay. Let's see if we can move this a little bit. Okay, first of all, thank you, dear colleagues, dear organizers, all of you for inviting me to come. I'm really, really pleased to be here. And a big, big congratulations to Archie in the development you have seen over the years. It's really, really fun to see. I remember when Lucian came on to council quite a few years back, and with the start of the Romanian Association. And seeing the development over the years is special. And it also gives me, having come back into the EERA family, we call it kind of, because it is, it has that atmosphere. You feel home. And to actually see that what we do, it has an impact. It does mean something. It actually is important for development. And since I'm going to talk, probably it might make sense to just position myself a little bit. I am a pedagogue by training, so I was trained in the university in the Department of Pedagogy. So I have my PhD and my master's and all, but it was on the old system, long before Bologna. So I am a pedagogue, but what I have followed mostly in my line of research is a more philosophical and theoretical foundational thinking of teaching and learning. So that's what I'm working with. And I have done lots of empirical research before, and I do it now through my students. But what I follow, what I write, is usually around foundational thinking, and that will reflect my talk, of course, also. So, again, thank you so much for inviting me to come to speak at your conference. And the title, as you see here, oh, it has moved already. Before you have my Thinking Diversity in Educational Research, and this is kind of my topic because I work, for me that's an important topic in pedagogy and in thinking education. And I think one of the challenges with research is that we, or what can happen is that we think that we can inform practice. And I'll challenge that a little bit. But let me first dwell a little bit upon what I had in mind when I made this title. First, the idea of standardization. It might not have come to Romania the same way it has come to, but it probably is on its way in here too. And it has come to research practices, and the idea that one could frame educational research in one mold, making it reliable and objective for the purpose of steering education in the right direction. It's prevalent across both national and supranational educational policies. And through this, also how research is valued in universities. The idea of evidence-based research is usually backed by an idea that education, in our case, can be made more effective and hence provide a better economic output. And that idea is quite strong. It's hard to push it back. And I say, well, that may be a dream for some. But I see it myself as the end of educational research, simply because it's too reductionist. And in the end, counterproductive towards education and education research as important institutions within society. So this thinking in hierarchies, thinking in oneness is a trait of Western culture. The more challenging, thinking in difference, plurality if you like, that there is no one standard for education or education research, but always multiple, is much more demanding. And I want to emphasize it's important that we as educationalists challenge ourselves to do that. How's that done? Well, put in simple words, it has to do with resisting the desire to reduce complexity and probably the yearning for control. Education is complex, and finding a way of expressing this complexity in educational research and making use of what we can achieve if we're able to think and work with complexity is what we need to strive for, I contend. So this is basically what I will go through in my talk. I'll clarify a little bit around how I perceive the field of educational research, frame the objective of educational research, and I'll talk a little bit about, we have a lot of knowledge, and maybe education need to focus on how and what and how. And basically what I will through the talk is arguing for diversity in educational research and why we need it. I've been in those settings where the idea of standardization is so strong, the idea that there's only one right way of doing educational research, and I think we need to push that a little bit back for the sake of educational research, basically. And now we're going to do a test. See if this works. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, I'll just hear from you. I'll ask you to go on to mentimeter.com. Use this code. It was very small here, but 82162760. I'll repeat it after. And the question is, what is educational research? You can put in 3 things. So see if this one responds. Is it online, the machine? Yeah? Yeah. Then it should. Might have to wait a few seconds. The number? Yeah. So menti.com 82162760. It doesn't work? That's what technology for you. I'm from from a technological university. They helped me set me up. Oh, it will work. Okay, I said I'll believe it when I see it. But it could have worked. It could have made. It could have produced a word cloud. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But for me, that question is important. What is educational research for? And I am, I'll say 99.9% sure that what would have shown up here is a plethora, a huge variety of different kinds of research that's done. It's empirical. Some of it is more theoretical. Some of it goes into the normative ethics. Some is very practical, worked from action research, practical research. Some point to methodologies. There's various fields, there's various disciplines. I mean, you get maths didactic, you get didactics of history. So it just shows it's enormously big. There's so many strands of doing educational research. And that is, I think, for most of us that work in it, and I remember coming in at the beginning working with EERA, the idea, there's so many, how can we make, you have this urge of control, of making it kind of, can we make it more oneness in a way to see, so what is this? And it slipped every time. It is too big. It is to be able to put everything in one mold. It's not possible, and I think it needs to stay that way. That's my argument. And if we go further on, nope, that was too fast. There are two questions here. What is educational research? So what is it? And I think that's, you belong to different strands of doing educational research. The other one is, what is educational research for? Why are we doing this? And we're in academia. We know that academia is a hierarchical place. It might be that some are used to do it for themselves, for their own promotion, for their own career. That's part of it. But I think, especially with educational research, it's so tightly connected with something happening in society, education as an institution, which is, I mean, it affects us all. It has affected all of us here. It affects all our children. So it's an institution which is so big that we have to have some idea, why are we doing this? And if this had worked, we would have had another word cloud here, which is now you just have to imagine it. We're good at that. And I would assume that part of it would have divided in some of what education is for is directed towards the individual. It's directed towards individual learning for students, for pupils in school. It's also directed towards the communal. Education is important for societies. I know from Norway up in the far north, there are small communities, and the school is the core of the community. That's where people meet. If the school disappears, the community disappears very often. So school is really important in communities, and it has some societal importance, just like you have now been speaking of how your research association is important for Romanian research. It will have an impact. So my argument is that diversity is already there in educational research. And I would like to explore then further, why is it important to uphold this diversity? Now we come there. EERA's own statement about purpose is to further high-quality educational research for the benefit of education and society. I believe it's sufficiently open for an organization like ours, but still pointing in a direction. And the open question is, of course, what is benefiting education and society? I'm not intending to give a definite answer to this. For me as president of EERA, this is something we as an organization work together to develop with representatives and liaisons of EERA. And the challenge is to concretize and act on what we say we intend to do. Something worthwhile pointing out is that underlying the purpose of educational research is the idea that research can provide a basis for change, that research can lay the ground for improvement. resonating with Enlightenment ideas, meaning that insight and knowledge can drive humans and societies forward, always growth. For education and education research, I still believe in this, but at the same time recognize that today we have maybe arrived at a sort of endpoint where the knowledge we have tell us that we, as a humankind, must change our action and behavior dramatically if we want to survive on this planet. Another way of putting this is to say, we have the knowledge, now we need to act. So if, to a large extent, we know what we need to know, and some claim that time is running out, nature is at the brink of, from where it's no possible return. And I could continue here, and I hear that my talk could end up in a sort of a doomsday preaching, and that was not my intention. I'd rather hoped to turn this around and by asking, what kind of demands does this situation put on educational research? If we take Greta Thunberg's message that we need to act now, maybe educational research could provide ways of profound thinking, exploring, questioning, trying out, making innovations about what and how humans can change action and behavior on individual, communal, and global levels. That would entail educational research into possible ways of acting in education, and it's a huge undertaking. For this to happen, I see a link between research and practice. A relation could be re-established based on the ground that we have the knowledge why. We know why we need to change. Now we need to change human action and behavior. Traditionally, that I pointed to in the beginning, the linear and hierarchical model of doing research says that educational research, often referred to as research proper, will provide the facts, the insights that should inform a given practice. Meaning that when provided with the facts, a human practice should or could change. I think that many of us as educational researchers have seen and experienced that this scientific, theoretical model for change does not work. Additionally, our everyday lives have in a way proven that we do not follow such a rational model. Even if humans know that what they do is not sustainable, they keep doing it, or we keep doing it, relegating the problems to be solved elsewhere. Maybe by magic or technology, and we see how that works. Maybe. Ska vi se, gick den för fort? Ja. Educational research into ways of acting, a practical approach I call that, means developing insight into what humans can do to act sustainably, and how we can imagine ways of doing this, and trying this out in education. It means to ask practical philosophical questions which would need extensive help from educational research. This line of arguing claims that thinking diversity in educational research means to establish a kind of relationship with practice. It means taking departure from a current situation, a situation which is backed by facts and knowledge, and ask practical questions about what is needed and how can it be done. I think this is necessary if we want to accomplish the change of human behavior and action that is needed on such a grand scale. In this, I believe education is a key, and that educational research, if it undertook such an approach, could rightly claim that it is for the benefit of education and society. This kind of research is not necessarily a new approach. Action research and practitioner research and those who have been working with innovations in industries and also in schools, has used similar approaches for a few decades. But scaling this up would need, but the scaling up that is needed if we as individual researchers and educational research associations are to work imaginatively on researching practical approaches to grand societal challenges, it will require out-of-the-box thinking. In my words, it means thinking diversity in educational research. I have now pointed to a reason for thinking diversity in educational research by giving the practical approach a more prominent position, one that entails a space for greater diversity in educational research. This to me means taking into account that people are human. In other words, unpredictable, like Arendt says. Meaning humans seldom act according to what research say they should do when researchers does. So the idea that research can directly inform practice, like I said, usually don't work. It doesn't work. There's so many examples of that. It's just, you will experience again and again. And I think it's about time we need to change the model. We need to change how we think about what research can do. So that this relation needs to be thought differently, I believe. Because that's how humans are. They act in accordance with their experience and how they live their lives. That happens in schools, it happens for research, it happens for us all because we're human. And a consequence of what I'm saying is also that there is no one universal solution to questions of what and how humans should behave and act differently. Hence, there is no one solution to educational research. But there are also other reasons for this. For me, safeguarding diversity in educational research is also important because education is always culturally and socially embedded, and solutions for education are not universal, but have to be designed for human life in its local context. And this calls for diversity in educational research. Let's start by looking at this from an organizational angle. An example of diversity in educational research is expressed through the 34 different networks of EERA, which is the organization, and ESER is the conference. These networks have grown and developed because they were nurtured by people, researchers as yourselves, who are engaged in developing a forum for their strand of educational research. The networks have grown organically, as we say in EERA. Some seem to overlap, and they do, but they are run by people who are committed to the work they do within a community of researchers nationally, sometimes locally, and across Europe and beyond. And the evidence of flourishing of these communities of researchers is that people participating in ESER, the conference, and hence these different networks, keep expanding until now. And also the number of networks has grown dramatically over the last years. The last edition is network 34 here, so which is research on citizenship education. In addition to this, I should have put on top the ERG, the Emerging Researchers Group. We don't call them a network. We call them a group because it's almost, they have the pre-conference, and there was around 500 participants this year, largest ever. And to me shows that this really is important work to run these. This is part of our work, of what we do in EERA. And an organic grown structure, or maybe rather kind of groups that we call them in EERA. We call them networks. Some other associations call them SIGs. like early, I think. EERA decided very, very early in its phase to define them as networks. At a certain time, we thought that we could change that, but again, found that nope, network signals the exact right kind of work that we want these people to do, and also what people are doing, I should rather say. It isn't a tidy categorization based on a logical structure decided by an overall system, as you see when you read through this. And some find this disturbing because the logic of how these networks express educational research isn't that easily interpreted. And we constantly get that question, couldn't it be clear? Couldn't we make it clearer? But you have to understand the way they have grown and the way they are nurtured by researchers like yourself. That's how they're kept alive. They're kept alive by humans who put efforts into the work. And all the work that people do in the networks, in the whole organization, is voluntary. None of us are paid. It's because we believe this is important work. So I'm convinced it must stay this way, even though it might be a little bit disturbing to figure out what kind of organism is this. But you'll get a hang of it once you start engaging with it. That's at least what I found out with most people I've met over the years. And what this grouping of 34 networks show is an abundance of personal, professional engagement to promote and advance educational research. To me, this is the living reality of the organization. And furthermore, this means that ways of promoting and developing educational research must be drawn from this fact, not the other way around, by imposing or forcing a structure onto this living organization or diversity. And we tried it many, many years back now. We tried to do it, and we found out quite fast, nope, this is wrong. That would be the way of killing people's engagement. You have to let people engage. And they have to express how these networks, and they work, all the different networks work a little bit different. Okay, seems like you wants to, I've been too long on one. Okay, I'm all. Yeah? Was there a question or no? No. Was it timeout or something? Okay. Not this session. Okay. Let's see. Did I jump one? Yeah, I think so. That's good. How can we promote educational research from this perspective of diversity? Meaning that we need diversity in educational research because education is socially and culturally embedded. The EU have a strategy of promoting evidence-based policymaking, which calls for a certain kind of education research. And my contention is that the kind of research that is needed to back this type of initiative has a tendency of only accounting for a limited fraction of educational research. And in addition, also a fairly limited scope of what education is for. There's a long line of research, especially in the field of ed, arguing why that what works agenda won't work. Gert Biesta, Richard Smith, Gita Steiner-Kamshi, and several others. Their argumentation show how only a very limited scope of research, basically introduced by economics and one strand of psychology, the cognitive, have come to define the whole field of education. This is in itself is a talk, and I won't go there. My intention is only to point out that what policy and policymakers usually ask for is something, meaning evidence-based research, that will not answer to the broad challenges we face as a humanity. How education could answer to this will require a whole set of different approaches, and I believe educational research can develop socially and culturally relevant educational research about what and how in relation to human action and behavior. To do things differently, humans need to train on what they need to do and how. The what and how questions I have pointed to in relation to education and educational research will not be answered by evidence-based research alone. My contention is ways of doing, solution and approaches need to find answers where and how people live. Basically, the argument is as follows. Educational research needs to be diverse because education and cultures are diverse. It is a fact that education is culturally embedded, like yours here in Romania. It goes without saying that developing your education and education research and ways of acting differently needs other initiatives than those that are required in my home country, in Norway. There's one argument I'd like to reiterate here. The idea that research can inform practice in a way that tells practitioners, teachers, that is living human beings what to do. And I've said this a couple of times, it's probably not sustainable. Human beings are unruly. They operate out of their own initiatives, habits, and traditions. So instead of seeing this as a problem, we could look upon it as a potential. The kind of systematic knowledge acquired through research can be a resource for people, for instance, teachers, but only when people see themselves as actors who are making a change. You hear a difference? A traditional hierarchical model usually places research above practice, as I've said. Thinking research can inform practitioners what they need to do. Research then becomes a system imposed on a living organism. And this is what I've tried to show several times now. It doesn't work. So let's stop doing that. It does not work. And as educationalists, we should know better. We need to be creative in ways of finding. So what do we do then? And I don't have the answer. The 34 networks is, yeah, they look for different, but that line doesn't work. Like I already talked about. That when you go out of your manuscript, you forget where you were. So, but what I argue is that educational research can inform and collaborate with educational practice. And for me, that with is, we don't research on, we can research with. And there are various ways of doing that, engaging with practice. That means teachers, students, parents. But always remember that in education, that's the living, or that's doing teaching. And how and what, the how and the what of how humans can act and behave differently, finding ways, trying out ways, this is where research comes in and can be a huge help, I think. A last point from a practical pedagogical point of view means that we have to be aware of the limits of what educational research can achieve. So far, what I have argued is that one size to educational research does not fit all. It's not conducive to education. Furthermore, that education is always socially and culturally embedded and therefore needs a diversity of approaches through research. Knowing about what and how one could do education to change how humans act and behave does not mean all challenges have been solved. If we could find that, that would be great. As I've said, in practice, in the classrooms and between humans, other skills are required. And those are the practical pedagogical skills. I asked, how do we promote quality in educational research for the benefit of education and society? And I have answered by accepting diversity in educational research. But I don't want to stop here, because for diversity to function, to be flourishing, at least one more thing is crucial, and that's communication. You might call this transdisciplinarity. Education research is already a field is transdisciplinary. And I believe it's paramount that we keep developing communication across different strands of educational research. Conferences like your own here is one way of developing communication within the diverse ways of doing educational research. And in my old critical, pragmatist, pedagogical thinking, I would argue that this is crucial to developing quality in education. This is how quality is advanced. It doesn't happen like that, but it happens over time. And I think that's, you speaking here in the beginning and also being in the workshop, seeing things happen, seeing that, well, over the years, educational research in Romania will change because of you. Because of the engagement, because of what ACRE is doing every year. It will change, but it takes time, but it will gradually change. And I think if you keep up an open community where there's possibilities for communication, it can create something great. And my key here is that one of the things we will have to fight against is competition. Competition on the national, supranational levels. A lot of education policies push towards more competition. Rankings, competition. I don't think is very, some competition, yes, don't mind that. I've done competition myself, but remember always, if there is competition, there's only one winner. And if education is about one winner, Norway won't win. Romania probably not either. There is only one winner, and they'll probably be native speakers of English. And they're already up there on the rankings. And I don't think that competition isn't healthy. It doesn't help us. So I think get rid of the competition and work more on communication. But that means being open to critique. It means engaging with those who do research differently than you. And this is a crucial point for me. I think communicating across different ways of those who do more quantitative, discuss with those who do more qualitative, those who do more theoretical, because that's in those meetings things happen. I've seen at EERA when the philosophers of education had 2 symposia over 2 years actually with the people who do what's it called, measurement, there's some words that are hard in English, but statistics, measurement, assessment. And I mean, you should think they're so far apart, they have nothing to say to each other. But those symposia were, I mean, there was a heated debate there. We did really disagree with especially some of the people from PISA, but the discussion and some of the core challenges that we were thinking of were quite alike from the theoretical and from the more statistical point of view. So that kind of communication is crucial for the development of educational research, I argue. Another line of communication we need to develop is communication with the field of practice, those who work in education. And my contention is that we need to address at a much greater scale the what and how of education to find ways of acting differently as humans. This can never be answered by researchers alone. Cooperation with the field of practice will be needed. And here is a huge challenge for us as educational researchers. So, to sum it up, my main points. We need diversity in educational research in order to find ways of acting and behaving differently as humans. What and how humans can act differently refer to practical pedagogical questions that researchers and practitioners need to deal with. Communication is paramount to enhancement of educational research and practice. I hope my arguments show why diversity in educational research is important to safeguard. Educational research that is for the benefit of education and society supports and help develop initiatives together with people both inside and outside of formal education. And all of this calls for a wide variety of approaches through educational research. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Marit. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have really, we allocated some time for questions and answers, for comments related to the presentation. So now we are opening up a little bit, if you
Sure, I'm happy.
The discussion towards the participants here. So, question, comments, suggestions, reactions after this presentation.
Disagreements.
Disagreements, of course, to show diversity. I think there are some critical points that were touched upon here, but I'm sure that you have noticed yourselves some critical points. That's an interesting debate here about how we conceptualize educational research. So before doing it, what is our perspective? What is our concept of educational research? Do we go for the standardized linear approach? Do we allow for diversity? What are advantages and risks in both of these? Mm-hmm. Should we meet in the middle, how the Danish people say? So here we are. Any ideas or questions or comments at this stage? Okay, Ciprian, please.
Just one continuing the ideas already raised by presentation. Isn't it a danger to broke up in too many small pieces and a lot of ideas that eventually are not able to communicate back together? And I'm thinking precisely of the 34 networks and groups that you presented. Finally, how we harvest and how we put the pieces back together in more general strands, if we are encouraging a lot of work within this group.
Okay. Yes, it is definitely. That's a huge challenge. But I think this comes from organizational and complexity thinking. The idea that you can actually generalize it into one, as soon as you do it, it just go apart again. And for me, education as a field is really, it's so complex that you have to acknowledge the complexity. Acknowledge the complexity and then find, I think that my other point here is that the real change happens, like we say in Norwegian, it happens on the floor. It happens where people do teaching. That's where the real change will happen. Also in universities, how things are done. And if you see, like I pointed to at the beginning here, and I think Lucien also pointed to that, the things that you've been doing in your organization and the change that has happened over time, that's important. It's important for Romania, but it's also important, the way that you develop now will influence Europe. It will influence our organization. It will, over time. It does, but the predictability of it is difficult because it isn't. It's Hartmut Rosa. He talks about the uncontrollable. because our Western society has the idea that we can control, that it's been so strong over so many decades. But basically, it is so once you accept that, there are different initiatives. And I think what our organization can do and your organization can do is finding ways to connect. Always work on, so you have to work on communication. You have to work on how things can connect. But accepting that this is complex, accepting that it's not totally controllable. And then things start growing.
Thank you very much. So risks of approaching huge complexity with simple approaches, and further risks about allowing for such a wide range of approaches, both thematic as the EERA networks and methodological. All right. I think I saw a hand over there.
Derived from that comment. So first of all, I thought that maybe the way we do research, educational research, makes us focus on the way data and results inform practice, but we also should maybe think more about the way the research practice informs educational practice. Like what results from doing research, from interacting with the participants, like in the way we do things in the participatory research, because that's where I came from. I'm a qualitativist. And from this, I have this research. What do you think about this question? What does it mean to inform practice? Yeah. Like we asked ourselves, what does it mean to do educational research? What is it for? But what does it mean to inform educational practice? And do you think that this is a kind of fruitful question? Thank you.
Yes, I can speak loud.
Yeah. We have a mic here, so
yeah. This one.
If I don't bring that, I'll stay with the
yeah. Okay. Yes, I think you're on to the way of thinking in the same lines. That this is giving also the voice. Often in participatory, you talk about the voice, that you leave the practitioner voice there to express. For me, it's don't collapse research and doing teaching or working in school into the same, because they're never the same. But I think they can inform each other in the way that Yrjö Engelström is a Finnish organizational thinker, and he talks about learning as expansive, and he works in these processes talking about expanding thinking. And for me, that visualizes in a way how you can help. I mean, when you are in a practice, when you're a teacher, you know from your own, you get into habits, you do things in one way. To have help to expand ways of thinking, ways of doing differently, you need someone from outside. And good participatory, good action research, there are lots of examples of that really can change how teaching is done in school. It, again, doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And it takes time for the practitioner to find. You might have an understanding as an outsider, but when you're in the practice, you have to understand it and make it yours in order for it to work. Because that's how humans work. But I think I know that a lot of educational researchers do a lot of collaboration. Like Fari, I know you do a lot of it. Do a lot of this collaboration with practitioners in the field. And I think that a lot of educational research will be there, and it's important. Others will be in the more theoretical, in the more empirical, statistical, finding out there are so and so many students not leaving education. School leavers is a big thing right now. There's so many schools. We need that knowledge also. But finding ways to communicate. I'm not sure, I'm probably getting a little tired here now, so I'm not sure I really answered your question, but I think it sounded like, yeah, you had a good idea.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
There's one back there, a couple back there.
In the abstract of your presentation, at the end, you were mentioning these non-humans as participants, and I was really looking forward to how you see this non-human agency as being addressed.
Yeah.
Expectation.
Yeah. You know, but it probably is embedded in my thinking, and I didn't express it that so directly, and that's how you deviate a little bit from your abstract. But that's, I think it has to do with the kind of thinking that I'm doing comes not necessarily from a part of the post-humanist thinking tradition. It does come from, but it also comes from very practical thinking. And I have to be very. I'm a dog musher. I don't know if you have dog mushing in. Probably don't have in Romania, but I'm a dog. I've been so for 30 years. That means I'm on a sled behind 16 dogs, and I mushed dogs for many years. And I worked with dogs, big herds of dogs. And they've taught me a lot. And they taught me a lot about me as a human. And they've made me understand there's a lot of stuff I don't know. A lot of stuff I can't do that they can teach me. And so Western society we have a very divide between putting the human over the non-human. And this is getting back at us. And I think that was kind of the opening of what I started saying, that we know that what we're doing to this planet we're living on, we're killing it. And nature will get at us. And so we need to find ways. I think that's underlying it all the way. We need to find ways to live with nature. Vari's work in indigenous areas. I live some of my life up in Alaska, working with indigenous also. And they have a different relation to nature, living with nature, although it's changed because it's been motorized and mechanized, so it's changing, unfortunately, some of it. But the basic of that kind of culture, that living with nature, it's the same concept, with nature, means that you hunt. You don't go out and hunt thousands of ptarmigans. You hunt the ptarmigan, the caribou that you need to survive the next winter. And it's a way of thinking. It's a way of, when you are in Alaska, every time we are in a place like this, you acknowledge the land first. You acknowledge where you are, where you stand, the land that make you live. And this is a way of living that we need to we have to bring it back if we want to survive, I think. It's just, because nature is quite harsh, and we have, well, it'll be tough. And it has started. I mean, this summer, Norway, never had anything like it. There's quite some people died, but I mean, houses just disappeared in these floods because you had so much heat down here. So it's happening, and it'll continue. So I think I think for me, this is where education has a huge task, tremendous task, because we know it's going to happen. I know there are deniers still, but it will happen. But how and what we need to do, as humans, we need to train that. We need to find those ways. And education is one of the places that this can be done. We need to work on it because we have to. Probably need to be pushed all the way out to the brink before we realize that we have to, but that's us. So I don't know if it did answer really, but there was one more back there. If there is time.
We have possibility to take one or two more questions if the case. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Asia from the National University of Science and Technology, Polytechnic of Bucharest. My question derives from the Brussels bubbles language or way of conceptualizing research. In the recent year, they have put forward the idea of risk-taking research.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your perspective on risk-taking research in relation to our education field. Thank you.
That's not my really field of expertise, but as far as I've seen, I don't think they think of education, because usually what they think of education is as a field of dissemination of things they already found out, so they can disseminate that education, work on it. I think, in a way, when I say, if I bring it back to what I talked about, I'd say that finding ways of acting and behaving differently, what to do and how to do it, that will entail risk-taking. In a way, we have to try out stuff we haven't done before. We have to, because it means transforming ways of thinking, ways that because we are embedded in ways of thinking that limit us, and they need to change. And I think this, I don't know whether we should call that risk-taking, and probably the EU has, because it's related to other fields of research, and they have some other ideas and a very strong belief in technology, of course, and technology probably will help us with some, but not everything. It's the way that those that work with the weather talked this summer about this is happening at a much faster scale than we imagined. And it's going to continue happening. And so I think we need to take risk. We need to be creative in ways okay, what role can education play in this? What role can education research play in this? And that's for the sake of our children, because we'll be gone, but they have our children, my grandchildren, they will live on. And they'll have to figure out if we don't.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very humanistic perspective on what educational research means, especially related to the question, how does it look from the eyes of the bureaucrats? Any last question on the table? Well, if not, I will close with a kind of last question. I don't ask you to address it extensively, but if you could think about one or two trends of educational research for the next 10 years. So let's imagine that we are traveling a little bit in time. We know that the world is changing. We know that we are changing. How do you see us all talking about educational research in, I don't know, 10 years' time or at least 5 years' time?
I think one key word is sustainability. We got a new network on sustainability. I remember when it came in, and it's the old me thinking, what's that? Why do we need that? What's that for? And then gradually getting to know the group of people that were working on it and have done for fairly long. So sustainability, yes, I think all of us have to address that. And we'll have to do that if it's in a local context or in a more national or global context. We have to address it. And it will put some strains on us. I think, I don't know, just on the top of my head right now, I don't know if it does, but for me, that's for me. I think this relation with practice is something between research and practice. That is an area that needs development. There are initiatives through action research participants. They've done some But I think it needs developing. It needs development from that. Ways of doing this collaboration with the field of practice. And educational research, because it's so connected with the field of practice, that needs development. That would be my 2 suggestions.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Marit, for this presentation and for the good discussion that we have afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.